Superstars has moved off of syndication to the USA Network to replace Action Zone. It's pretty amazing to me that one of the biggest reasons the company took over, talking about the WWF, when in regards to the national wrestling scene, is syndication. But by and large, syndication's dead by 96. Just roughly 10 years later, it's not even a thing anymore. Really?
Dead.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it really was. And especially when you look at, the business was changing. Look, the business was changing in every aspect of the word, from guaranteed contracts to, live television in prime time on cable, where you could reach. You go back 10 years, though, and not everybody had cable. So that was real too. You had homes that didn't have. There were more homes that did not have cable than had cable. Syndication was the only way to reach them.
So help me understand. Something I've always been fascinated by is that wrestling is neither sport nor entertainment when it comes to regular syndication. Let me explain. In your local affiliate, whether it's NBC or CBS or Fox or whatever, usually between we'll say the 5 o'clock news and primetime starting, there is a rerun in there of some old show. And hey, that happens in the afternoons too. But that's never been an opportunity for professional wrestling. There used to be two and a half men at 6 p.m. in most markets. And, there's a ton of those opportunities out there for a show like Seinfeld or Friends or whatever. They just run reruns in that one time slot. But wrestling has never been able to be presented that way. Do you think it could be? Do you think you have to watch brand new content, or could you just have 30 minutes of filler content in there in place of a sitcom someday?
Maybe you could, but from a television programming standpoint, they pay a lot of money for those shows. So they want to get every dime that they can. So they're going to get a lot more advertising time off of a Seinfeld or a Frasier or what have you than they are for wrestling. And wrestling was something that they were able to, put on. And in some places, it was at one time either free programming or cheap programming. And then it became, oh, wait a minute, now they're getting syndication prices for it, and now they've got to work harder to sell it. And there was a foregone conclusion that the time to sell wrestling was on Saturday and Sunday mornings.
I've always just been fascinated by The Big Bang Theory or Jeopardy or Dr. Phil or even those judge shows like Judge Judy. They just bring in so much cash, and it feels like, if positioned properly, even if it is just an old rerun, you could chop up an old series of matches and just throw it on some affiliate in Hoboken and do okay.
Sports are different.
So
I think that
it's a little too sports for you.
Yeah. I think people would look at it and look at it in the now, and I don't think that they would want to see the nostalgia in that slot. You go back and look at ESPN. ESPN did that. They had 3 o'clock every single day. With global wrestling, and after a while, people were like, because there was so much rerun and repackaging of the same show.
Well, but that also wasn't top stars. I guess I'm wondering, could you chop up 30 minutes of Stone Cold and The Rock or Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage or whatever?
But 5 days a week, then what? What do you do next week?
No, I'm with you. I'm just fascinated by the shelf life that a Big Bang Theory has, for instance, and how those, guys were on Seinfeld and they're fucking Judge Judy makes $50 million a year. It's just ridiculous the amount of money they have from these syndicated things. I'm just noticing that in a 10-year span, it seems like Vince took over with syndication and then it's phased out, but it's still alive today, but just different.
It's way different. It's way different today. It's not as valuable today as it was then because you've got all your cable and streaming properties.
Do you remember there being a time, oftentimes things happen very slowly. It's like when you see someone who has lost a bunch of weight or gained a bunch of weight, but you haven't seen them in a long time. And then it's a big shock to you because you haven't seen it in a long time. But if you were there for the whole process, you saw it happen. The same thing could probably be said about syndication, right? It's not like you came into the office one day and you're like, well, nobody watched last week. It's dead. Right? Or do you remember that happening where there was a moment where all of a sudden syndication was just not as viable?
I mean, I remember the moment, yes. And it just became, you could reach more people at the same time with the same message on cable. It just, cable became more available to people, and it was like, all right, do you want to spend this money in syndication, or do you want to go one time and go live on cable? And cable seemed to be the more viable option.